To welcome everybody to the Finance and Administrative meeting today. We have our agenda before us. Pleasure the committee to adopt that, please.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, we have our minutes from our October 29th, 2024 meeting. Obviously, these two ladies were not a part of the committee at that time, but I understand for the Municipal Association of South Carolina that as long as you have reviewed the minutes and agree with them, we can move forward. So, is there a motion to do so?
I have reviewed them and am fine with them, and so I move adoption.
I second.
All in favor? Thank you. Next, we will have a presentation from our Finance Director, Ms. Adriana Burnett. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. And welcome. Welcome, Ms. Donner, Ms. Bryson. It's wonderful to have you here. So the way this normally works, and please correct me, Mr. Brown, is that this is supposed to be having a conversation, giving you an update, answer any questions that you may have, or any suggestions that you may want to recommend as it relates to the reporting that I put together. And suggestions are always welcome. I'm here to make things better and things more visible and transparent to everybody in our community and, of course, our members of town council. So it's been a while.
With that being said, since this is your first time before this committee, and
Yes.
as we're going through the presentation, is it okay that we can ask questions along the way?
Yes, please do. This is the financial update is a short presentation. So please do feel free to ask any questions. If I don't have, by whatever reason, I don't have an answer, I will be glad to get back with you on the next committee meeting with an answer. Okay? These are the topics that I will be presenting today. We have what I've been doing for the last few months is have an executive summary of what I see happening with our financials. In this case, it's year to date, since it's been a while since we met. And then give you some understanding of what is our consolidated fund balances. And then one of the things that I added new from prior presentations is I'm trying to compare where we are year to date for our revenues and our expenditures. Just to give you an idea, are we about on track compared to last year? Are we a little higher, a little lower? And then in addition to that, give you an analysis of the budget that was approved in 25 and give you an idea of what is the remaining balance as it relates to that budget. And then in the same manner, do a very high level presentation on the CIP, all the different projects that were approved in 25 and where we are with those projects, how much money we have encumbered, and what is remaining. And again, answer any questions you may have along the way. So if you look at the executive summary, actually, we are very, very privileged to have the financial statements and the financials outcomes that we have. We have an increase of 10% in our fund balances compared to the prior year. So we are doing exceptionally well. And for someone that is in finance, it's wonderful to talk positive. When you have positive and great numbers, is actually a great presentation. And if I'm looking at the major fund revenues for fiscal year 25, we have increased those revenues. Again, I'm not including any kind of other financing sources or any kind of transfers in and out, but just looking at the revenues for the major accounts for the major funds, we have an increase of about 14%. And we compare that against our expenditures. Our expenditures also increased by 4%. So I'm comparing those two numbers. It's always great to have revenues higher than expenditures because that shows that we are, as a town, we are operating very efficiently, and we're doing a good job with our cash management. So again, revenues is always great to have revenues higher than expenses. And then I have some high-level key financial highlights, and I will be showing you these percentages along the way as I keep talking, as I present to you the fund balances and the revenues and all of that information that I mentioned earlier. So this is our consolidated financials. So what I try to do here, this is a little different look from what you have seen before, Mr. Brown. I'm trying to show you the last 3 years of financials. So we have fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. And then I have a beginning balance of fiscal year 25. So as you can see, for the general fund, we started with $39.5 million. And then year-to-date revenues, we have actually have $23 million in revenues that have been allocated to the general fund that we have received year-to-date. And when I'm saying year-to-date, we're talking about January 31 of 2025. And then the same thing for year-to-date expenditures. We have about almost $32 million in expenditures. When I add those two together, the ending balance as of 1/31/25 for the general fund is $30.6 million. If we compare that number against 1/31/24, the same period of time, you can see we have an increase in fund balance of 22%. That's really good. Increases are always good, especially when our fund balances compared to the same period of time are higher. As it relates to the debt service fund, again, it's the same concept. We have at the beginning of the fiscal year 25, we have $13.7 million. We have received year-to-date in revenues about 4.7, and then we have expenditures of about 7.2. Again, the fund ending balance as of 1/31/25 is $12.2 million, which is a little decrease. Again, you have to remember this is a debt service fund, and we've been paying down our debt, our principal and interest. So that's why you reflect a little decrease of 4%. So again, compared to last year. And then the same thing with the CIP fund. We started with $7.7 million at the beginning of fiscal year 25. And then we have year-to-date revenues of $722,000, expenditures of $19 million. And then you see a negative number here. So you're probably thinking, well, why do we have a negative number? Well, there's a good explanation. Last year, something that happened, and you will see this probably, let me move one here. If we look at the revenues here on the CIP fund on this screen here, we have 722 compared to $3.9 million. And the difference is because last year we got from Beaufort County, we actually got a reimbursement for our adaptive traffic systems. We got a reimbursement of $2.7 million. So that was a one-time reimbursement. That's why that number of revenues last year compared to this year is higher. So let's assume that we received the same amount this year, which we're not. If I add the 2.7 to the 722 number that you see there, the amounts of revenues would be about the same amount. So again, we got a reimbursement from Beaufort County for the adaptive traffic signal system that we're not going to get again this year. So going back to, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Yes.
So I have a question on that.
Yes.
So that still doesn't answer in my mind why there's almost an $11 million negative in the CIP fund balance. Is that because the transfers haven't occurred yet for the expenditures that are out there? And what is that process to make sure? Because I know those funds stay in, accommodation tax or hospitality tax or whatever until there are expenses that are hitting. So what is the process to make sure that those match up, the revenues and the expenses?
Yeah, so this is our CIP. So if we look at the CIP, and I'm sorry I'm jumping ahead, but I'm trying to answer your questions as we go along. So for CIP, we have an approved budget of $82.8 million. For the expenditures, which is just the same 19 number that you see on that consolidated statement, we have expenditures of $19 million. And then we have encumbered 14. So what we're saying with the 19 is that those are the actual expenses that we have paid. And then, yes, in some cases, we haven't transferred. We normally pay out of our general fund, so we normally transfer money to pay our invoices out of the general fund. So in some cases, our transfers are not in line with our payments. We try to make sure that we transfer money as we pay, especially if we're talking about $90 million. So an explanation could be the transfers, because the transfers are reflected at the bottom on the consolidated statement and not on the top. So when you're looking at transfers for revenues and expenditures, the $19 million number, I started reflecting that number on the bottom rather than on the top. If you look at 22, 23, and 24, the transfers in and out are included already in those CIP fund balances. While I'm doing in 25, I'm separating them because I'm trying to see the picture before I do any kind of transfers in and out. So yes, we normally pay our invoices and we transfer money at the time when the invoices are paid. And in this particular case, the situation could be that we haven't transferred enough money to account for those transfers or for those payments that we have there. The other one too is in relation to the reimbursement that we did not receive. So that creates that big difference that you see there.
So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that as time goes on, those transfers in and out will match up to the expenses. And
That's
so instead
correct.
of seeing that almost $11 million negative in the fund balance, there will be money transferred in to make up that deficit.
Exactly, and you should not be seeing this negative number at the end of the fiscal year. And hopefully you will see it at the end of next month when I come back here and tell you this is where you are in your fund balance.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
If I could follow up with a question. It seems to be our practice, sometime during the spring, maybe closer to the end of the fiscal year, that we do a budget amendment.
Yes.
And is that often when the transfers come in before the end of the fiscal year?
Yes, so we try to do transfers, as I mentioned earlier, as we pay in our invoices. There's also a transfer that happens to, we do an amendment in the spring, especially for land acquisition. So you should be expecting an amendment for land acquisition as well. That is going to happen, I think this year is going to happen around our first reading for our budget for next year. So we will be doing a budget amendment at that time. Yes.
If I could ask one more question about the general fund, the increase in revenues, that's always good to see. Are you going to give us more detail about the 22% increase in the general fund, what the sources of that? Because I know our property tax collections are made by the county, and I'm guessing the county sends some money in January, but maybe more in February?
Yes, so most of our revenue, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Right.
Most of our revenue comes in the last 2 quarters of the year. So right now, we're starting to get our property tax revenue from the county. But I do want to remind you that the revenue that we get for property taxes is very small. So we don't get, if we pay $100, it doesn't mean that we get 100 back from the county. We get about 8.6% of our revenue, which is a very small number if you're looking at the school districts and you're looking at the other areas that receive funding from property taxes. So our little portion for property taxes is 8.6. So yes, we're starting to get some of that money. As you know, property taxes were due on January 15. So it takes some time for the county to process the payments and for us to start receiving the money, but we already started collecting some of that property taxes. We also have other things that also go into our general fund. We have like electric franchise fees. We have our short-term rental permit fees. We have other different sources of income that go into that general fund that we don't separate for presentation purposes, but I'd be glad to, if you desire for next month, if you want me to have a breakdown for the general fund on what are the different revenue sources that make that balance. I'd be glad to provide you with that information if you need that.
And so, the 22% increase, is that from various sources of revenue?
It
or
is
one
from
in
various
particular?
sources of revenue. It's not just property taxes. It is a lot of different sources of revenue. Yes.
And then, for our next meeting.
Yes, sir.
you Could just provide us a little bit better detail as how we arrived at that percentage increase, I think is what I'm hearing.
Okay. So if we move to the stormwater utility fund, again, our beginning balance is is about $13.8 million. And then we had received from the stormwater fees, we had received about $2.2 million in revenues. And we have spent about $2.1 million for stormwater. So that gives a remaining fund balance of about $13.9 million as of 1/31/25. Compared to last year around the same period of time, it was about almost $12 million. Again, this is a 16% increase, and going back to providing you with more visibility about what exactly makes those percentages, I'll be glad to do that next month. CDC, as you probably are aware, we received a grant from the state about $5 million. So we started with $5.6 million. We have some revenues of $168,000 and some expenditures. We are utilizing part of that grant and this year, and that equate to about $151,000, which gives a remaining balance of $5.6 million, which is very similar to what we had the prior year. It's only a 1% difference. Again, we're spending more money this year than the prior year, but it's only about 1%, so it's not very significant. And then the housing fund, we started our beginning balance with $2.1 million for the housing fund. And so far we have spent about $119,000, which gave us a remaining balance of 2.02 or 2.03 compared to last year of 1971. So it's a 3% difference as it relates to that. So altogether, I mean, if I'm looking at the whole consolidated number, if you look at the total, it is a 10% increase on fund balances compared to last year around the same period of time, which is very good for us as a town to have our fund balances to go up.
I have a couple of more questions, thanks.
Yes.
It has to do with the housing fund balance, so, and I'm just gonna make a comparison to this, Gullah Geechee CDC. You know, they get a $5 million grant, so you see $5 million out there being populated for 2023, 2024, et cetera. Housing fund has been $4 million in regards to the budget and the amount of money that they have accessible. So I was wondering why the fund balance only shows $2.1 million.
So I think you're referring to that this $4 million that you see reflected here. Is that correct? So this is what was approved in fiscal year 25. I mean, our fund balance, it is what it is. That's the $2 million is what we have in our fund for housing. However, it was approved based on the projects and the different things that we had in mind that we were planning to do for 25. It was approved at $4 million. So that means that we will have to find other sources of funding and transfer some other sources of funding from other funds to be able to pay for this $4 million approved budget. So that's why there's a difference. I mean, the fund balance, it is the $2 million, but the approved budget, based on whatever projects the town was estimating to do for housing, it is $4 million. So we will have to, in order for us to pay for those $4 million in approved budget projects, we will have to move money from other sources of fund.
It just seems like it's being handled differently than the CDC fund, and that their original budget and funding is $5 million and it's there. I don't know if they have laid out programs to spend that $5 million in 2025
I think I
versus
cannot
what you said for
answer.
the housing. So I'm just trying to understand how,
Yes,
how
I
this
cannot
works.
answer what projects the CDC is thinking of doing in the future. I do know that there is a grant that we received, the CDC received, and they are projecting, like if you look at this budget that was approved, they were projecting to utilize about $3.4 million. I mean, that would be probably a question better for Thomas Boxley. And so far, the net activity for the CDC is the same concept. I mean, just because we have the funds, in this case, we have the funds of $5 million, therefore the budget that was approved was 3.4. And the housing, we have the funds of $2 million, then we are approving a budget of $4 million. That means we will have to transfer money from other sources of funds to be able to pay for all these housing fund projects that we have. So it is the same process, except one of them has the money, the other one doesn't, and we will have to make transfers to be able to accommodate for whatever projects were approved during this budget process.
Can I ask the question a different way to see if we can get a little bit more clarity? Maybe let's compare it to the CIP fund that we spoke on earlier, where we're showing a negative activity because we have not done the transfer yet. So in this particular case, what I think I'm hearing, but I want to make sure you answer this, Ms. Burnett, is that although there's only $2 million in the housing fund, there was a budget for $4 million. So if we were to expend more than that $2 million, we would be seeing a negative fashion until we transfer from another fund.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could follow up, I don't understand all the flows of funds, but as I understand it, the $5 million was a grant from the state that came in at one time.
That's
So
correct.
it's already in that bucket. With regard to the housing fund, there are different funding sources coming in at different times, such as the ATAX money is part of that. And I don't know whether those funds have been transferred in, but because the giant 5 million came into one bucket at one time, that's why it's there. And the others there's some there, but then others will be transferred later in the year.
Yes, and one of the sources of fund for housing also was the ARPA, the federal grant that we received. We have about $1 million that was allocated to the housing fund, and money that has already been encumbered. As of December 31 of 2024, we were required by law to utilize and encumber that money. So part of the housing fund consisted also of ARPA money that we have received as well.
I think Ms. Turner's question is a good question because as we get into budget discussions,
Yes.
obviously we have some housing projects on the horizon like North Point. We're hopeful that the number that we pledged originally is going to be enough, but it may not, right? So as we get into these conversations, just understanding what that fund balance is based on prior contributions that have come in the past, and also understanding that without the ATAX 15% that you speak of, we do not have a continual revenue source to go into that fund, right?
Yes.
So I think we need to, understand and be realistic that we're probably going to have some shortfall with what's put away versus the needs, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, and we can use CIP as an example. So whenever we propose there's a budget for X number of projects, and then you approve that budget, then one of the things that we do in finance is looking at all the different sources of funds, and we can properly allocate those sources of funds. Some of those sources of funds also come from grants. Some of them come also from all the revenues that we collect. And some of them have restrictions. So some of them we're supposed to have reserves. We're supposed to don't go below a certain limit. So all of that we take into consideration when we are allocating all the different sources of funds to fund the different projects. So to your point, let's assume that we have a big project, but we don't have enough funding and we cannot transfer money from the other funds. Then you need to make a decision. Do we do this project, yes or no? So a lot of that decision-making has to be done with the understanding, this is the fund balance, these are the restrictions with that fund balance. This is what we can transfer, and this is how we can utilize that money, yes or no.
You said you had questions.
For the public, can you speak, if you go back to the prior fund balance slide, can you explain the other financing sources and transfers ins and outs?
Yes, so we have, so these are, by law, we are required to have these major sources of funds, which are the ones that are listed there. Then we have other financing sources. So we have what we call the special revenues. We have beach preservation fees, we have hospitality tax, we have TIF tax, we have road usage fees, we have real estate transfer fees, we have electric franchise fees, we have short-term rental fees, we have other different grants that we receive. So those are the other financing sources that we have. So instead of putting them, some of them go into the general fund eventually. It is like a pool that we utilize for our operation of our town. But some other ones that stay under the line that says other financing sources. So that's what goes in that line. And then the transfers in and out is like thinking when you reclass, when you move funds from one fund to the other fund. So one of the things that I'm doing a little different in 25 is I'm actually want to see what those transfers are and how do we compare to the prior year. So I have it separated for 2025, but if you look at 22, 23, and 24, those transfers in and out are already reflected in those balances. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So again, this here is new. It's a new table for you. And again, it's to understand how do we compare our revenues versus our expenditures? How do they compare year after year? And if you look at the general fund compared to last year's around the same time, we have a 26% increase. Same thing for debt service. We have 78% increase between the two if we compare that against last year.
Can you explain the 78%?
Yes, so one thing that you also have to remember too is that right now, and probably we're going to see this more in the beach renourishment presentation workshop that is coming up. But one of the things that we have done is we actually are paying our debt. And here it shows an increase is because maybe during the period of time we have not paid either the principal or the interest. So all of it has to do with the timing of money. All of it has to do also with the interest earned. And has that something that has been posted compared to the year before. So a lot of that has to do with the cash flow, the timing of money, the timing of payments, the timing of interest. So that's why you see a difference here. I think once, as I start looking at trends, I start looking at the history, I start putting a process in to get, which I've been doing that for the last 8 months since I've been here. There's not going to be that many fluctuations between revenues. There are things that I cannot control. I cannot control when the county decides to send money, and I cannot control when the state decides to send money. So there's things that are out of my control, but if it's process related where we are posting something at a specific period of time, if it is within our control, one of the things that I would like to start doing is making sure that we're posting, that we're transferring things around the same time. So there's not these fluctuations that we have here. This is the year-to-date, 1/31/25. The amount in the middle reflects the net activity, and net activity means revenues minus expenditures, creates this net amount. If you look at the general fund, one of the major that makes that net activity of 8.8 is actually we have personal expenses of $3 million, and we also have operating expenses of 1.4. In addition to that, again, to the point, the property taxes, we started really receiving some of our revenue for property taxes, which is about $9.8 million. We also have received $570,000 in local aid tax and $266,000 in business license fees. All of that is reflected in this net activity that we have for the general fund. In the same manner, the debt service fund, we have earned interest of $274,000. Also, we have the last one is we have paid $270,000 in interest, and then the last one, we have received $46,000 in interest and $3.4 million in property taxes. As it relates to the CIP fund, again, is a similar concept. We have paid $531,000 on park improvements. We have $312,000 on fire station improvements and $238,000 on Honey Horn improvements. And then, of course, we have received from the county about $23,000 in impact fees and $43,000 in interest. So we started receiving our revenue. Stormwater utility, again, we have paid about $176,000 in personal costs and operating and debt service expenses of about $177,000 in the stormwater maintenance. And we have received $27,000 in stormwater permit fees and $1.2 million in property taxes. Same thing for CDC. The CDC has utilized $16,000 for personal expenses. And then the sources of funding, we have received $20,000 in interest earned. Housing fund, we have used $32,000 for housing consulting and other events that we had. So that's what makes the net difference that you show here reflected in this template. And then, as I mentioned before, this is our CIP. This is a very high level of our CIP. And I have it here by program. And again, within those programs, we have different projects. So if you look at the beach program, we had a budget of $21.6 million. So far, we have spent $259,000. And we have encumbered $745,000. So that gives us a remaining balance of about $20.6 million. Same thing with the Pathway program. You approved 5.5. We spent 346. We encumbered 244. So we have a remaining balance of about $4.9 million. And if we move to the roadway program, the same concept, $10 million was approved. Then we have spent almost $1 million. We have encumbered 1.2, and then we have a remaining balance of $8 million. I don't want to read line by line because you can see the numbers right there. But if you look at the whole subtotal number here, we have about $79.6 million that you have approved. And then we have expenditures of $10.2 million. We have encumbered 14.9. So right now, as of the end of 1/31/25, we have about $54.5 million remaining in our CIP. And then I separated the land acquisition and administration. And Ms. Bryson, you mentioned before that there's going to be another amended. That difference that you see here, you're going to see this amended to be able to pay for to balance this account for $5.7 million. And again, we will be doing that somewhere around May. So we can make this negative disappear. So if you include that negative is reducing that 54 to 48, but in actuality, it should not be reducing that number by $5.7 million. That's why I gave you a subtotal number, so you see the actual number that is remaining for CIP. Questions, comments?
Go ahead.
On the land acquisition, we'll be getting some money from the Green Space Sales Tax Fund, reimbursement for one of the a large property purchase that we made. I'm guessing that money hadn't come in yet, but when it does come in, that'll be part of that amendment when the money comes in to, as you say, change that negative number.
Exactly, yes.
Ms. Burnett, before you
Yes,
move
sir.
on, you mentioned the process of improving certain areas, and you had
Yes.
talked a lot about the CIP,
Yes,
how that is measured, okay?
yes.
Can you speak a little bit to what that will look like for us as a council as far as those metrics are concerned? Because right now, and I don't want to get ahead, okay, but I am making assumptions when I look at the park program, for an example, where it looks like between what we spent and what we've encumbered, we're about a 50% burn there. So does that mean that those projects within that park program are halfway there? Or is there another metric that we will be presented to help us understand where we stand in these programs?
So this is what is taking place since last time we talked, and I know the two of you ladies were not involved in the prior FNA meetings. But we have created within my team in finance, a new team called the CIP finance team. The CIP finance team is led by April Aiken. Actually, she's sitting right there on the audience. And she is doing an outstanding job along with Shanna from our team. And what they're going to be, what they're doing right now is working very closely with the CIP engineering team. And the purpose of that, to give you a very high-level overview of what we're doing and that you are going to be able to see going forward, is understanding the projects, understanding how much money was really approved, how much money we have actually spent, and how much money are we on track to completing the projects. Is the remaining $10 million in this case for the park program, is that enough money for us to finish the project, yes or no? So the CIP finance team will be able to answer that question in coordination with the CIP engineering team. Because one thing that I don't want to come back to you and say, oops, by the way, that 10.5 is not going to be enough. Or maybe it's not enough because we realize that the cost of that project is higher than what we anticipated. Then in that particular case, we will be able to explain to you, okay, if it's 3 phases of this project and we are on phase 2, then we're going to need additional funding to be able to finish that project. Then at that point, you have, as an FNA committee and also as a town council members, you have a decision to make. Does it make sense to finish that project? Do we leave it as is? But not all projects can be left as is, so there's a decision that has to be made. So to answer your question, the process is changing. One of the things that we're doing differently that we will be proposing in fiscal year 26 is a 5-year budget, where we are able to say, okay, we have this project, and this project is going to take about 3 years to be completed. So how much money are we going to need in year 1? How much money are we going to need in year 2? How much money are we going to need in year 3? And for us to be able to communicate to you, this is how much we think it's going to be, and this is how much it's going to be in year 1. Right now, I cannot tell you of this $10.6 million, at least in finance, I cannot tell you right now if that's going to be enough, yes or no. Again, we're working towards being able to get you that answer and being able to give you a breakdown. And one of the things that we want to start doing in collaboration with Sean Leniger is to give you updates, in detail updates of some of these projects that are very important to our community and say, this is how much money we have spent so far, this is where we are. So we are moving forward. It is a lot better than when I talked to you 6 months ago. Right now, even our ClearGov new software that we have for budgets is allowing us to enter this information by year, and it's allowing us to create this 5-year budget. And we will be able to tell you at any specific point in time with the analytics, with analysis of where we are in a specific project.
I am in total alignment with that process of laying it out for 5 years and doing it more on a cash basis, laying out exactly what your cash needs are going to be each year. I think the way that it's currently done, it overinflates the budget and makes it look like you're going to be spending all this money in that calendar year when you know that you're not going to. So I think it'll give a much more accurate reflection of what the town is going to spend versus the current process. In addition, as we lay out those 5 years, I think it'll be important as well is to lay out the funding sources that would be used
Yes.
to cover those, plans in the future as well.
Yes, and one of the things that so right now, the CIP engineering team and the CIP finance team, we're working very, very closely to make sure we're able to answer those questions and make sure that we are really accounting for the cash and make sure that we can identify and come back to you and say, we're taking the money out of this fund and this is how much we're taking. The idea would be to be able to take 100% for one fund, but that's not going to be the case. In some cases, we will have to, I call it share the joy among the funds. But we need to be able to tell you that as well. So yes, the process that we have in place is going to be able to give you that answer, be able to help us understand better our numbers as it relates to all the CIP projects that we have. This is a high level. This is just for your information so you can see what is remaining, how much we have spent year to date. But it is more visibility, more clarity. That's something that we're planning to do as you approve the 5-year budget for 26, as we start planning better how we're utilizing our cash and our funding.
So, Ms. Burnett, obviously it's a change of business for us.
Yes, it is.
And I agree with Ms. Turner, this is a positive direction that we're going. And not to put any pressure on your team, but in the next quarter, during one of the monthly reports, if you could give us sort of a sneak peek as to how this is working. I think it would be important for us to understand, the direction you're going, and, we may have thoughts about where we're trying to end up along the way, okay?
Yes, I think we'll be glad to do that. Actually, I feel very proud of the things that we have accomplished so far. It has been a lot of work, by the way, but we are in a better place today because I think we have realized that coming back to you with an $82.8 million budget, it creates expectations that we are going to finalize $82 million in projects in the first year. And I think with this process is going to be able to really talk about how much are we really spending in that first year. And it's not going to be $82 million in this case.
Bryson, yes?
Yeah, it seems as, I think I understand that as part of our budget review this year, that this new 5-year plan will be a part of that. And I don't know how much detail we'll know because town council will have some workshops on the budget coming up. And
Yes.
during that time, CIP, I think, is separate one day usually is what we do. So perhaps then we'll be able to see a lot more about this plan and how it's going to work, so.
Yes, and one of the things that I would like to be able to do during the process, during the workshop process, to be able to tell you of the money that is remaining, do we need to roll forward any of those funds for the next year? Do we need additional funding to finish some of the projects that were already approved? Or do we have a brand new project? So we should be able to tell you and break it down in those 3 different components so you know exactly what is it that you are approving and when we think, based on our projections, when we think we're going to accomplish that first year.
All right, I had some final comments.
Yes, ma'am.
And it has to do with what I'd like to see moving forward.
Yes.
Yes, so thank you. First, I want to thank you for reporting out on the fund balances and providing a holistic view. One of the things that struck me during the annual financial review, the auditor made a comment that when looking at the ACFR and the holistic financial statements, he said this is the only time you'll see these numbers. And I couldn't disagree more. I think it's important that the finance team have an opportunity, as well as the town council, to see the entire financial picture. So moving forward, you've had the detailed breakout of the 6 funds identified at the top of that first exhibit that totals $53 million. But that's only 24% of the total balances. And I'd like to see further breakout of the other financing sources and transfers in and out in future reports. And the reason is that these are tax dollars we receive that we accumulate and save and we use to help pay for special projects and expenses within the town over and above the property taxes and business licenses and fees we collect. And you listed what those items are, and there's several. And that there are rules associated with them on how much you can spend, how much you need to have as a minimum, where you can spend the money, how you can spend the money, et cetera. But I think it's important to understand what's happening with those fund balances for those categories, as it really helps us to understand the health of our economy. And it's useful when having funding discussions. And so an example of that is later today at the town workshop, we're going to be talking about the beach renourishment and how we're going to pay for that project. And there is a beach preservation fee balance that's available of 42 million. But there are also hospitality fees that have a balance of 27 million. So I think it's good for the finance and the town council to have that visibility into all those other fund balances as well. And I know Councilman Bryson already talked about wanting to understand the breakout of the revenues of the general fund, and I agree with that comment. Again, I think it's an opportunity to understand the health of our economy, what's happening with our business licenses, et cetera, our property taxes, our local accommodation taxes. So in the future, I'd like to see more detail on that. Thank you.
Pardon me, follow up with one other comment and a suggestion. Pardon me. And could you do something about the pollen while you're at it? I'm sorry.
Remember that
That really
conversation about not being able to control everything? This is one of them.
I apologize, that wasn't my comment. But I've asked the mayor and town manager, we're about to go into a workshop for 2 days about a new strategic plan.
Yes.
And so the strategic plan and the budget, in my view, go hand in hand. Because how are you going to make the plan happen unless you have the money to make that plan happen? So I've asked for quarterly reports on the strategic plan. And I think we're going to be talking about that during the workshop, and I'm hopeful we're going to be getting that. So I think in hand with that, and make this to the full council. And then I think it'd be helpful to have a quarterly report on where we are on our finances, because as a member of the public, I would want to know, how are we doing, are we doing well, or are we in the hole? And so if we can give just a short report on, where we are each quarter of the fiscal year, I think that would be helpful too, to have those two go hand in hand.
And I'm making the assumption you would like that report at the same time you get the strategy update
Yes.
as well. Okay?
Yes. And it doesn't need to be in such detail as this committee goes through every month, but something just to inform the public about how are we doing? Are our finances doing well, or is there a major problem there we need to know about? So, thank you.
Okay. I will make that happen. I think what you're asking makes perfect sense. Something that I have always believed is that every single decision that we make, either here in government or in corporate, there's always a financial implication. So to your point, yes, a strategy plan is as good as we can afford to pay for those plans. So yes.
Okay.
I have another topic.
You have
Yes.
another topic, but before you move into the next topic, I am going to do two things here, so just bear with me. I do have two of our colleagues in the room, Councilwoman Becca, Councilman Alfred. Obviously, we continue to evolve as to how we ask Ms. Burnett to report out to us. I want to give you all the opportunity. If there's something that you would like to see before this committee, as far as reporting is concerned, you offer that suggestion at this time. Nope.
I was prepared to make comments, so I'll
No worries.
for another time. Thank you.
If you have any along the way, please send them over to me and Ms. Burnett, okay? That way we can make sure we get them covered during the report, all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody signed up for public comment on this particular topic?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4B.
Yes. So the next topic deals with affiliated agencies. this meeting on this topic today is not to go over the detail of the applications. This is just to introduce to the general public that the application process for the affiliated agencies was closed on the 14th of this month, and there were 11 applications that were submitted. And what you see in front of you are actually all the applicants, the list of all the applicants, and the amount that they are requested is the green item of the column that is highlighted in green. The total amount is about $3.2 million. That's the request for the fiscal year 26. All the applications have been loaded in our Civic Clerk system. There's nothing, all the information is there for you to review. One of the things that we would like to do in the next FNA committee is come back to you and give you an explanation of who is the organization that applied, why is it that how they're going to be utilizing the funding that they're requesting, and also talk about how much money, as you can see here, how much money we have provided in prior years. So we would like to talk more in detail about the affiliated agencies. In addition to that, one of the things that I know, Mr. Brown, you asked me the other day is to potentially come back with some suggestions about how we can improve the process of affiliated agencies. So Angie Stone and I will be meeting in the upcoming weeks to come back to you with a recommendation what that looks like. So the question that I have for you, do you want to do that next time in the FNA committee, or do you want to wait for later? That's a question. We'll be ready regardless of, but we will make sure that we meet your deadline.
Sure, absolutely. Let's take some time today to hear
Okay.
from the committee on their thoughts around the process.
Okay.
And I'd encourage everyone to as frank as possible with this discussion. Obviously, this too is sort of new to us.
Okay.
In the past, we did not have such process in place. We're, I think, maybe 4.5 years into it now. So the policymakers, the public, and also the applicants have had some time to sort of try this on. And in the spirit of continual involvement, I think we need to make sure that we are trying to get better at this, okay? We want to have a process in place that does not open the door to everyone, but also gives us opportunity for some creativity in our town, right? So with that, if you could just take some time to hear from us individually as to our thoughts
Okay.
as you and Ms. Stone start to develop sort of some suggestions around new process here, okay? So with that, y'all make it hard because normally I would say ladies first.
All right, I'll go first. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about process improvement, and I'm a firm believer in it to build and improve and strengthen, what you have, because we can always do a better job. So when I think about affiliated agency, one of the questions I ask is, what are we trying to accomplish? And we want to recognize we're a limited service government, and that affiliated agencies are cost-effective ways of delivering what I would call high-impact services. And that's one of the questions that I have as I look through the list. I look at some that are very high impact, meaning they have a lot of people involved in the process, a lot of people that receive benefits, and others have a much smaller number in regards to receiving benefits. So, I'm looking at cost-effective ways of delivering high-impact services with a public benefit on behalf of the town of Hilton Head. And, I started to go through the applications to figure out in my own, mind what is, high impact, low impact, et cetera. So I think there's an opportunity to lay out to the public and to gain alignment of town council about how we want to use these dollars. When I looked at the application, there was a statement in it that says, and very much like ATAX. It's not the intention of this type of grant to be reoccurring. But if this is about having things like the Island Rec be our town service that provides parks and programs, we would of course be funding that over time. So I think we need to understand and differentiate between affiliated agency and ATAX in regard to the intention of the grants reoccurring. We also have MOUs that we utilize in the affiliated agency program. And I think as we go through the review process, it would be helpful to have those documents as well.
Is this something that you would like to have for the next meeting? The MOUs that we have currently with each of the, some of the organizations that have applied here? Is that something that you would like to have?
Yes, with the packet.
With the packet?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we will go ahead and add the MOUs to the existing packet.
I think it's also important to identify all of the benefits that are received by the affiliated agencies and make that clearer. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, there's dollars, but there's also many times finance support. I know the finance area does a lot of work supporting some of these organizations in regards to their accounting and reporting. And I think it's good to spell that out and even estimate what that benefit is. I mean, those are in-kind contributions that should be reported by the nonprofit organization, and I'm not sure that we provide that information. But I think I'm just looking for the transparency of laying out everything that they get over and above money as well and other benefits from the town. If we think about the process, in the application, there are other materials that are attached. And at least in the pre-read that we had today, we didn't get those attachments. So I don't know what the process is of sharing those, and those include the P&Ls, the balance sheets, and one that I'm most interested in is the effectiveness measurement, to see how these organizations are measuring the effectiveness of their programs. So I'm not sure what the process is of sharing that information during the decision-making process. And then I just have questions about what are we looking at when we are reviewing? Does the finance team and the town who reviews the application, do you look for missing information or ambiguous information, et cetera, and go back to the agency to collect that so that they have the best application that they can provide? And and then as we fill out that application properly, what is the selection criteria to determine if we're going to approve the affiliated agencies? And that's one of the reasons why I was saying high impact versus low impact. I think there's an opportunity to differentiate there. And there are probably other effectiveness measurements, et cetera, that could be used in the decision-making process. Another process question is, how does this flow through the decision-making? Comes through the finance and administration meeting, then does it go to town council for approval, much like the ATAX? Or is this something that's just rolled into the budgeting process? I think.
And actually, that was,
Yeah, I'll take that one.
yes, please do.
So, as you are well aware, we're going to spend the next 2 days together. And one of the topics is going to be process, okay? And this item is something that we're going to be talking through as well. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you for reading my mind. All right. And then should we have a financial formula or range that we're targeting to spend? And we've talked about that with ATAX as well. So those are some of the things that I have thought about as I've looked at these applications.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, great comments, great questions. Yes.
Okay, before I turn it over to Ms. Bryson, I just wanted to react to one of the questions that Ms. Turner had. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Burnett, but not every one of the applicants that have received funding from the town in the past has a memorandum of understanding. Is that correct?
As far as I understand, again, this is my first year with this process. I have seen a lot of so I'm looking at the list of organizations. I have seen a lot of the MOUs for a lot of them. I don't know if all of them have
I'm
one.
not quite sure as well. I think we need to take an inventory, and that
Yes.
needs to be a part of our discussion at our next meeting as we sort of tighten up on the process here. Are we going to require an MOU with organizations, which then will require more time to get those MOUs in place that may not match up with budget season? So I just want to have that discussion, okay, at our next meeting as well.
Yes.
Give us an inventory of who does and who does not, and sort of give us an idea of what it takes to create a MOU from scratch. I think that's important for us to have as well.
Yes, and the MOU, of course, we will need Mr. Curtis to be assisting us with that, especially if we're going to be making changes and changing our process. It needs to be reflected in those documents.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Bryson?
On the list that I have, I think some of it's been covered already, but I'll go through my list. So I think one analysis is what kind of services do we need, or what kind of services might someone provide to us that the community needs? So based on, and I think we use Island Rec as an example. We don't have a Parks and Recreation department. They are our department. And we have a long-term contract with them. So I did have also, do we have a contract with them or not? And is that an indication of, we've already decided that they should be, for lack of a better word, affiliated with it in providing town services? And then I think the other balance of it is that what kind of services are there and how can our community benefit? And is it the kind of services that the town should be involved in, or is it something different? And to that point, does it meet the legal test? Are there constitutional provisions about, are they meeting a public purpose? So can we provide them funding? So that needs to be included in the analysis. And then another indication is, are we already leasing town property to them for use? Which means that we're associated somehow already. And so is there funding, or is the lease of the property the source of funding? So to the extent that we lease property with anyone, then I think that's another test. Then looking at what other South Carolina jurisdictions are doing or not doing.
Best practice.
There's no sense reinventing a wheel if there's a good one out there. So let's look, and perhaps we're unique. As I understand this process, it kind of grew like Topsy. It was like, well, I've got my favorite organization and I think the town ought to give them some money. And then somebody else on town council in the past said, they do a great job. We should help them out. So having some policy set forward and a way to test it is the way to go, instead of saying, hey, I've got a new favorite agency I want to support. The other thing is in looking already at the applications that we'll be considering next month, I saw that some of the analysis and the proposal is based on, we get money, and I wondered how this worked. We get money, tax money through the town, and that's great. But now we're coming and asking for more money. And I'm going, why didn't that fit over in the tax bucket? And as I understand it, it's because tax, you have to meet the Turk requirements. And so there may be some management or operations that don't meet those requirements, but yet we're still connected to this agency. And so they need another source of funding to help them with something that Turk will not fulfill. So I think that's part of the analysis as well. If we decide that they are going to be an affiliated, associated, partner agency, whatever we might call them. Another thing that we can look at is that it reminds me a little bit of the United Way process, in that there's an application. There may not be agreements with United Way agencies, but there are metrics for performance. And so looking at, and maybe the Community Foundation also has metrics for performance. So those other kind of, I hate to use the word grant, but those other kind of funding agencies, I'll say it that way, have some performance metrics in them. And so how do we measure prior performance and say, here's what you need to do to perform to get this funding? Then look at those other examples, and there's probably others that I haven't thought of. But those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about, in putting together a policy, to make, on which to make our decisions.
So these are some of the things that I hear you saying and that I would like to bring to your attention to help you with a decision process and help you decide if the people that I have, or the organizations that have applied, do they get the money, yes or no? So what I would like to do is make sure you have copies of all the MOUs that we have. So you know what has been the agreement in the past with these organizations. In addition to that, I make sure that you have all the spreadsheets and all the information that has been provided to us. I'll make sure that whatever the information we require as of the process we have today, I'll make sure that the information is information that was sent to us. If not, my team will start making calls to these organizations to make sure they send the information that they were supposed to send with the application. In addition to that, one of the things that I think, to your point, is some of these organizations are getting ATAX money. Some of these organizations are getting funding through our CIP process. So what I would like to do is be able to have a comprehensive document that shows all the different contributions that we, the town, has provided to each of these organizations. So you can compare and contrast, so you can see how much money each of these organizations is actually getting, not just through the affiliated agency process, but ATAX and any other sources of funding. So I think that will help you also have visibility and clarity on how much money they actually are getting.
You're gonna have that all ready by next month, right?
Well, here's the thing. You would like to get this 1 week before this presentation.
Yes.
And as you recall, you have moved the presentation for March a week, 2 weeks earlier than expected. So March 18 is our next FNA committee. We only have a couple of weeks before I can do this.
Okay.
And before my team can do this. So, but I don't want to delay the process. So we will do our very best to get this information to you. If by any chance it's more commitment than what we can actually accomplish, I will let you know, Mr. Brown, and perhaps you can give us an extension of time to be able to provide you with this information.
So let me see if I can help you with that as well.
Please do,
okay?
help me.
And I've got a couple of comments that I want to make as far as the process is concerned. But for the applications that are before us now, those are applications that are responding to our current process. Okay?
Exactly.
So I want us to all
Yes.
keep that in mind, okay?
Yes.
So we all have the applications in front of us, and I would encourage our colleagues as well, make sure that they have the documents that have been provided to us thus far. That if you do have detailed questions about any of the individual organizations, that we pass those on to Ms. Burnett and myself.
Please do.
That way that they can respond accordingly. Obviously, this is a heavy task to go through everything, okay?
Yes.
And I trust that your staff will do that and come back with recommendations. But if we have thoughts beforehand, I want to make sure that we get those. I'm gonna get to you, Mr. Alfred. Give me one second, okay? And I just want to make sure that you capture this comment that I had as far as process is concerned. When we sit together for the next 2 days, we'll have a discussion around strategic planning that will have to tie back to our comprehensive plan. So part of this process, I think, is important that there are elements of our comprehensive plan that we want to achieve that we may not be able to do ourselves as to why we have affiliated agencies, okay? So I think that tie back needs to be an important piece of our process as well, okay? All right. Mr. Alfred, please approach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having wrestled with these issues as a member of this committee for the last several years, it's pretty clear that this is a very anomalous type of subject matter that we're dealing with. It's not very clear. It's hard to deal with. And I would like to suggest that consideration be given to reducing the effort and amount of money that we put into affiliated agencies, primarily because it's very difficult to deal with. What, as you all have mentioned, what are the criteria? And the objective is to find a governmental function like recreation, for example. But at the same time, you go to the bottom of the list and you've got early childhood education. That doesn't have much to do with us. And I would urge that we try not to encourage more applications and that we begin running some of these off gradually over a period of time to reduce the number of recipients we have in this area. And my first candidate, as I've made clear in the past, is the solicitor's office. Not that the solicitor isn't doing a good job, but it has nothing to do with it personally, but that function is clearly not a municipal function. It is a state function or a county function. And anybody in government who deals with these issues knows that that's the case. I do not believe that the solicitor's office is still receiving money from the other municipalities in the county. Originally, that's the way it started. I think we may be the only one left. And I would urge that that be one that be eliminated this year and that efforts be made in going forward to reducing the number of recipients of the affiliated agencies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. We got that note, Ms. Burnett. To the point of the solicitor's office, I think it's important, not to put more on your staff, but, there has been a trend of other municipalities sort of shaking their way out of paying these funds, okay? We need to understand that,
Okay.
to vote yea or nay on this. And so I'm gonna charge you guys with helping us to accumulate that information so we can stand behind whatever decision we ultimately make, okay?
Yes, so we will add to the list a best practice, because that's what I call a best practice, trying to understand what other municipalities are doing.
Thank you, okay?
Okay.
Councilwoman Becker, anything you want to add?
I think that,
Can you come up, because I know from watching that when you speak from there, the folks that are watching can't hear us. Thank you.
you're welcome. Well, to first say, great committee meeting today, great conversation. Thank you for all the input. You've encompassed an awful lot of things that are on my mind. And with that, the comments by colleague Steve Alford have summed up some very important points that I hope that we follow through on and are able to come to agreement with.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bryson, yes.
If I could say one more thing, you mentioned the comprehensive plan and the tie to that, and I agree with that. In fact, I had a note tie to the strategic plan.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
thank you, so I echo that. So if we have something in our strategic plan that we can't do, but some other group can help us out with, that might be a need as well. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you for the
All right.
feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Burnett. Anyone signed up for this particular item? No, sir. No? Okay. Anyone signed up for non-agenda items?
No, sir.
Okay, so this will be the favorite part of our meeting. Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to thank the public for showing up today. Thank Ms. Burnett for an awesome job and sort of getting us pulled together here. And I want to sort of reiterate to our colleagues that, you know, the idea of working with us through these committee discussions is going to be ultimately important for us having something on the table that we can agree on at the end of the day. So with that being said, we are officially adjourned. Thank you all.